And what does your Catholic dogma say about ensoulment? What does it say? Your Catholic dogma, you, the self-described Catholic, what does your dogma say about the ensoulment of a fetus? Can you tell me?
I was raised Catholic, sir, but my church is against the teachings of Christ on many areas.
Answer my question. What does the dogma of the Catholic Church, which you described yourself as a quote, progressive Catholic?
Okay.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Grab a seat because this one got heated fast. Piers Morgan sat down with three Christians who could not be further apart. Andrew Wilson, a proud Christian nationalist, Isabel Brown, a young conservative voice and close friend of Charlie Kirk and John Fugelsang, who insists the right has hijacked Christianity entirely. What starts as a conversation about faith in America turns into a full-on collision over the Constitution, the meaning of Scripture, abortion, and who actually gets to speak for Christ. And let me just say, one of these panelists walks straight into a question he absolutely cannot answer. Stick around all the way through, because the moment everything turns is closer to the back half than you'd expect, and you do not want to miss how it lands. Also, I'm genuinely curious. Drop a comment and tell me what part of the world you're watching from right now. I love seeing where you all are tuning in. All right, enough from me. Let's get into it.
You believe that Christian nationalism is against the American Constitution. Why?
Because the founders were very specific about not wanting to have an official state religion. Our official religion is all and or none. The problem is the movement of Christian nationalism is as against the Bill of Rights as they are against the actual teachings of Jesus, which is why you will never see our right-wing friends fighting to put any Jesus quotes on any buildings. Jesus never mentions abortion.
Exactly.
God asserts that a fetus is property in Exodus 21, that a woman's life has more value in his eye. God gives abortion tips for pregnant unfaithful wives in Numbers chapter 5. It's why abortion's not banned in Jesus' religion. And that's why God and Jesus and Moses and Paul and the prophets never once condemn ending pregnancies or say what the penalty for ending a pregnancy should be. Am I saying Jesus was pro-abortion? No. What I'm saying is for 45 years in my country, Piers, right-wing Christians have been groomed to prioritize something Christ never talked about and then vote against all the things he actually commanded. Jesus was against the death penalty more than once, not a fan of killing the sinner, never mentioned abortion, and yet you can't run for office as a Republican unless you want to criminalize abortion, have the government force citizens to be pregnant against their will, pretend that comes from Jesus, and also think Jesus was wrong about not executing people.
Isabel, I get the feeling you don't entirely agree.
No, not one iota of me agrees with that statement, Piers, and nor should any good...
Where does the Bible ban it?
In Scripture. It starts with a very simple commandment in the 10 Commandments, thou shalt not murder. Let's take off our Catholic hats for a
Judaism
second
does not consider a fetus to be a full life. Abortions are legal and free in Israel right now.
In biomedical sciences, and science is unequivocally clear that human life begins at conception. There is a genetically unique individual
the Bible
who has
disagrees.
never and will never exist again, that is a living organism. And if that species is in fact a human being, which it is, it should be required that we give that person the same dignity, respect, and human rights of any other person on earth. This is this toxic empathy twisting concept of the American church that has been hijacked by left-wing politics, where you can look at a human being waving at you on an ultrasound, just like my daughter did at 11 weeks old, where I could count every single bone in her hand.
As did my son.
You that the death penalty should be outlawed from society because human beings should have rights and dignity.
Said that.
Also look at a baby and tell you that that child is worthy of literal human sacrifice. It is disgusting to me.
Okay, Andrew.
And I'm just saying that the Bible never bans it. Jesus bans the death penalty. This is a movement that doesn't fight for the stuff Jesus talks about. They fight for the stuff conservative Christians prioritize.
I mean,
okay, let me bring Andrew.
Executions, yes.
Let me bring Andrew in here. Andrew.
Yeah, so the thing is funny is like he keeps on citing Israel as though that has not become a much more secular nation. There are Orthodox Jews who fight over abortion all the time.
Religion.
All the time, Orthodox Jews fight over abortion because of the idea of ensoulment, sir. And what does your Catholic dogma say about ensoulment? What does it say? Your Catholic dogma, you, the self-described Catholic, what does your dogma say about the ensoulment of a fetus? Can you tell me?
You have to understand something right away. Because the moment John turns the abortion question into a scripture trivia game, that is the moment he loses the real argument. When John said this, abortion's not banned in Jesus' religion, he thinks he just scored. He didn't. He admitted that his entire case rests on what a verse does not say instead of what is actually true about a human life. That is a weak place to plant your flag. And here's what people don't realize. You do not need chapter and verse to know that a beating heart matters, which is exactly why Isabel walks in and changes the temperature of the whole room. When Isabel said this, science is unequivocally clear that human life begins at conception. She dragged the conversation out of the clouds and put it back on solid ground. That is not a feeling. That is not a denomination. That is biology. A genetically unique organism that has never existed before and will never exist again. And this is the part that gets me. She doesn't stop at the science. She follows it to the only honest conclusion. When Isabel said this, give that person the same dignity, respect, and human rights of any other person on earth, she's simply being consistent. Either rights belong to a human being, or they belong to whoever happens to be convenient that week. Let me give you something most people skip right past. The oldest medical oath we have, written more than 2,000 years ago by physicians who had zero stake in any of our modern politics, specifically warned doctors against ending a pregnancy. People love to pretend this concern was invented last Tuesday by one political team. It wasn't. It is ancient and it is documented. So by the time Andrew leans in and asks this, what does your dogma say about the ensoulment of a fetus? Can you tell me? You can already feel the trap closing, because John has been hiding behind a label this entire time.
I was raised Catholic, sir, but my church is against the teachings of Christ on many areas.
Answer my question. What is the dogma? What is the dogma of the Catholic Church, which you described yourself as a quote, progressive Catholic?
The Catholic Church says conception. The Bible says first breath. My point here is that the Bible does not ban it.
Catholic who
Y'all have
believe in your dogma.
prioritized something the Bible never forbids, and you vote and legislate against the stuff Christ actually talked about.
So let me get this right. You're a progressive. You're a progressive Catholic that doesn't believe in your own dogma.
Andrew,
is that right? You don't believe in your own dogma?
I don't really know if the Pope would consider me a Catholic anymore. No, I think the church is wrong about a lot of things, Andrew. Some of us go beyond it.
Progressive Catholic. Why?
Because that's how I was raised. Let me ask you a question,
Catholic.
Andrew.
Because you were trying to give credibility to a Democrat. That's why.
Andrew, does God knowingly ensoul fetuses that He knows are going to be aborted?
According to Catholic dogma, yes.
People. Jeremiah,
so God puts a soul in a baby that He knows is going to be. So God puts a soul in a baby that He knows will be aborted.
Do you realize that by your logic, you would be denying the omnipotence of God? That God does not know you're going to die before you die. Do you believe that? You just said Jesus Christ is God.
I'm not denying that at all. I'm asking you: does God put a soul? Does God put a soul in a fetus that He knows is going to be aborted?
Hang on. I want to ask John a question just to round things off here, because we mentioned Charlie Kirk a lot. I watched a lot of the Charlie Kirk service, and I found a lot of it profoundly moving, I have to say. Not least of all, the crowd themselves. I did not get the feeling I was at some, full-on political rally. Trump did what Trump does, and he obviously made some of it political. But actually, most of the speakers, as I think Isabel said, really talked up other things that Charlie Kirk stood for. But the overriding feeling I got was of a religious ceremony here, paying tribute to somebody who, at the forefront of everything he stood for, was his Christian faith. And the one thing I can absolutely guarantee as a consequence of the brutal murder of Charlie Kirk is that I think there will be a definite increase in the number of young people identifying as Christians, and they will probably identify as Christian conservatives. I mean, that, John, I think is almost an inevitable consequence of what happened. What do you think?
And there it is. The whole thing collapses in a single sentence. When John said this, I don't really know if the Pope would consider me a Catholic anymore. That is the ballgame for the authority he's been claiming all night. Think about what just happened. He spent the entire panel lecturing everyone on what real Christianity is, waving his Catholic identity around like a badge. And the second he gets one direct question about his own church's actual teaching, he can't answer it. So he quietly concedes he might not even be Catholic by his own church's standard. You cannot appoint yourself the referee of a faith you've already walked away from. And here's what really gets me. Andrew doesn't even gloat. He goes straight for the logic. When Andrew said this, by your logic, you would be denying the omnipotence of God. He flips the entire trap back across the table. John tried to build a gotcha out of souls and abortion, and Andrew showed him that his own setup forces him to say God doesn't know the future. That is not a small slip. For a man trying to claim the high ground on theology, he just argued himself into a corner he cannot climb out of. This is the part people underrate. Confidence is not the same thing as being correct. John sounds certain. He talks fast, he stacks his references, he never stops moving. But speed is not substance, and when somebody finally slows him down with one clean question, the entire performance wobbles. Then Piers says the quiet part out loud. When Piers said this, there will be a definite increase in the number of young people identifying as Christians, and they will probably identify as Christian conservatives. That is the prediction that should rattle the other side. Because mockery does not create that. Contempt does not create that. Watching someone stand firm under fire does.
I don't care what they call themselves. I wish Christians would follow, believe in, and fight for the things Jesus actually talked about, as opposed to the things conservative Christians have been groomed to fight for and prioritize, which often have nothing to do with the teachings of Christ. There is no Jesus-based defense of Donald Trump support. You look at immigration alone, you have to reject God of the entire Old Testament, who commanded us to treat the alien as one of our own. You have to reject Jesus, who said that the way you treat the immigrant is the way you treat him. I need someone to explain to me why Donald Trump's right and God and Jesus are wrong. I don't care how people identify.
Okay,
I love many conservative Christians, and I'm not talking about the conservatives. I'm talking about the right-wingers.
All right, hang on, Andrew,
it's the same
explain
exact
that.
logic. Yeah, it's the same exact logic that he used when he was raising money for Kamala Harris, who said we have to have secure borders, told Guatemalans can't come into the nation, and said, quote, I did this now as justification because otherwise I would look like a hypocrite, because she was the lesser of two evils. We can use the exact same argument.
Yeah.
The exact same argument. It's the lesser of two evils to have a wide open border where human trafficking can occur.
No one called for a wide open border. No one called for that. You're bearing false witness.
You did. You said the religious refugees. We should look at them as religious refugees and just be totally
Jesus
accepting.
calls for an open border, yes.
That's what you said
Jesus
we should
called
do
for
and
an
how
open
Christians
border.
should behave.
God
this
called
is why
for
we
an
can't
open
listen
border.
to you.
And Ronald
This is
Reagan
why
called for an
we
open
can't
border and
listen
amnesty.
to you. Because, sir, you're a hypocrite.
I haven't
the very
called for
thing
that.
you accuse us of.
No, I'm not.
You yourself did.
Why?
Now watch how John tries to reset the board. When John said this, I wish Christians would follow, believe in, and fight for the things Jesus actually talked about. It sounds noble on the surface, but look at what's underneath it. He has decided that he gets to choose which teachings count and which ones get quietly shelved, and somehow every teaching that survives his filter just happens to match his politics. That is not following Jesus. That is drafting Jesus onto your team. And this is where it all falls apart for him, because the conservatives at that table do the one thing he never saw coming. They hold up a mirror. When Andrew said this, the same exact logic he used when he was raising money for Kamala Harris, who said, we have to have secure borders, the entire moral lecture detonates. You cannot spend the night branding everyone else a fraud on immigration while you bankrolled a candidate who flat out told people not to come. You don't get to be the border absolutist and the border moralist, depending on which camera is pointed at you. And then comes the line that ends it. When Andrew said this, you're a hypocrite. Everything you accuse us of, you yourself did. That is the cleanest summary of the whole debate. Every accusation John hurled, he was guilty of first. Here is what I want you to actually take from this. The reason the conservative side wins this exchange is not volume, and it is not insults. It is that they stayed consistent. They said human life has value, and they meant it everywhere. They said borders matter, and they didn't suddenly flip when the donor list changed. Consistency is unglamorous, and in a shouting match, it can even look like you're losing. Right up until the moment everyone realizes only one side actually believes what it is saying. And maybe that's the real lesson sitting underneath all of it. You can win a clip with a clever one-liner, but you only win the argument when your principles still hold up after the cameras switch off. John brought energy. Isabel and Andrew brought a foundation. And a foundation is the thing that is still standing the next morning. So what do you guys think of this? Leave your thoughts down in the comments. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.